Hello there, dear friends. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you something kindly. If you find these old stories bring you a little comfort, or if they help ease your mind at the end of a long day, I hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel. Your company here means a great deal, and your support helps me keep the lantern burning bright so that any time you need a tale to keep you warm, you'll know where to find one. Now then, settle in. See that your blanket is drawn up under your chin, that your pillow is plumped just so. Let your breath slow. Feel how the night wraps around you like a soft cloak. Outside, the world hushes, its self-lamps go out. Shutters are latched, and all the small, wakeful creatures begin to close their eyes. And in this hush, we open our little window onto another time. A time of old kingdoms and older forests, when the shape of the world was less certain and courage was the compass by which young souls found their way. This is the tale of Alder of Lowenfield, the boy who walked alone into the enchanted forest and returned not as he was, but as something more. The kingdom and the boy, Eldenvir. Perhaps you have heard that name before passed down through the scraps of song and legend that still drift from one storyteller to the next. In those days, Eldenvir was a realm of deep rivers and broad fields. Winters. There were long so long that the first thaw each spring felt like a miracle. The people were hardy and kind, and they had learned to respect the old places, the circles of standing stones, the groves where no axe dared bite, the caves that sighed out warm air even in January. Among the many wonders of Eldenvir, none were more feared or revered than the enchanted forest, which some called the Nightweald. It sprawled across the kingdom's western edge like a dark sea. From its heart, no maps returned unchanged. A man might step beneath its branches at dusk and emerge at dawn with his beard gone white, or find that all he had loved had turned to dust in the world beyond. But the Knights of the White Star had always sworn to protect the kingdom even from the forest itself. It was said their founder, Sir Torin, had faced the 7 trials in a single night, and that his courage lit the first lantern ever carried through the wood. Since that age, every squire who would earn a place among them must do the same. And so we come to Alder. He had not been born in a castle or a manor house. He was the son of Shepherdsh's father, a man of few words. His mother, a woman whose laugh could fill any room. From the time he could walk, he had known the clean scent of wool and hay, the shape of the hills under a harvest moon. Yet all his life, a quiet ache had lived in his chest, the ache of knowing he was meant to do more than mend fences and count sheep. When he was 12, he had seen the knights ride past Lowenfield, their cloaks like falling banners of silver. Something in that sight had struck him so deeply he could not speak for hours. His mother had found him staring at the road long after the last hoofbeat had faded. "You look as though you've been struck by lightning," she teased, brushing the hair from his eyes. "Maybe I have," he'd whispered, and though she'd laughed, she'd not forgotten the look in his face. Years passed. Alder grew tall, and his shoulders grew broad. He learned the names of all the stars. He learned how to mend a broken leg on a lamb, how to coax a fire from damp wood, how to set a snare that would not bruise a rabbit's fur. And all the while, that ache remained like an ember in his heart. At 16, he walked to the fortress of the White Star and offered his service. It was not an easy road, many laughed to see a shepherd's son step forward, but he never flinched, never turned aside. And on the first night of winter, he was summoned at last to stand before the gate to the enchanted forest, the Gate of Dusk. That night, the air was clear and bitter cold. 1,000 stars shone down, each bright as a bell struck in the dark. The torches of the knights cast a ring of gold light around the clearing, but beyond their reach the trees stood in a darkness so deep it looked alive. Alder felt the eyes of every knight upon him as he came forward. He held his lantern tight in one hand, though the flame inside it guttered in the wind. His heart drummed so hard he wondered if it would burst. The master of squires stood waiting. His beard fell nearly to his knees, braided in 7 long strands to mark the trials he had survived. His eyes were pale gray-like the first frost on the meadow grass. Alder of Lowenfield, the old knight called, and his voice was neither cruel nor kind, but simply vast, like a deep well. You stand at the threshold. Beyond this gate lie 7 trials. No man may walk with you. No hand may lift you should you fall. Only your own heart will guide you. The silence that followed was so heavy, it felt alive. Do you swear upon your life that you will not turn back, no matter the road or the darkness it yields? Alder felt the cold seep into his boots, into his very bones. He remembered his mother's hand on his cheek the day he left, and the way she had pressed something small and warm into his palm-a-twist of woolen yarn, the color of dawn. "A promise, you are never alone," she'd whispered. He closed his fingers around the yarn in his pocket, felt the lantern warm again in his hand, and he spoke. "I swear." The master of squires inclined his head, and the gatekeeper stepped forward with a ring of black iron keys. One by one, he tried them in the ancient lock, until, at last, the bolt withdrew with a long groan, as though the gate itself wept to open. Cold air spilled, outladen with the damp breath of earth and old leaves. Alder felt it draw him in. He did not look back. He stepped across the threshold, and the gate swung shut behind him, with a shudder that seemed to echo in his very chest. The torches were gone. The voices were gone. All that remained was the soft creak of trees and the hush of waiting. The first trial, the whispering oak. At last, the path curved, and there before him rose the whispering oak. It was vast beyond measure, a pillar of living wood, so wide 3 wagons might have parked side by side across its base. Ribbons trailed from every bough, caught by the wind in a slow dance. Some were fresh bright scraps of blue or green. Others were no more than tatters, bleached and frayed by rain and time. As Alder drew near, he felt the first stirrings of something colder than fear, something that reached through the marrow of his bones and pressed its hand against his heart. Then the voices began. At first, they were no more than a sigh, like distant surf upon a shore. But slowly they grew and grew, until he could make out the words, hundreds of them, hundreds of voices speaking in unison and in counterpoint. Turn back, turn back. You are not ready. You are only a child in a man's clothes. The darkness knows your name. The darkness remembers. He gripped the lantern with both hands and closed his eyes. The voices crowded closer, winding into his thoughts like ivy. He heard them name every fear he had tried to bury his father's disappointment, the nights he wept in secret, the certainty he would never be enough. Still, he did not retreat. When he opened his eyes again, he saw that the bark of the oak had split open just enough to reveal a hollow blacker than the mouth of any cave. And from that darkness came a voice deeper and older than any he had ever heard. "Child," it said, each word slow as a falling stone, "to pass me, you must answer my riddle. Fail, and your lantern will die. Fail, and you will wander these paths unseen and unmourned, until even the memory of your name is lost." Alder swallowed, and though his throat was dry, he spoke. "I am ready." The hollow glimmered faintly, and the voices fell silent, as though all the forest held its breath. "I am not alive, but I grow," the oak intoned. "I have no lungs, but I need air. I have no mouth, yet water kills me. What am I?" The hush that followed was deep as the roots of the world. Alder heard nothing but the soft flicker of his lantern, the slow beat of his heart. And so there he stood, Alder of Lowenfield, a boy with nothing but a lantern and an oath hand, all the voices of the forest pressing against him like a tide. He closed his eyes and spoke the riddle over and over in his mind, letting the words fall into place like pebbles at the bottom of a well. "I am not alive, but I grow. I have no lungs, but I need air. I have no mouth, yet water kills me." Each line felt like it had been carved into the darkness itself. He remembered the winter nights at home when the wind moaned through the cracks in the shutters, and his mother would lay another log upon the hearth. He remembered the way the flames would dance, bright and hungry, needing nothing but air to feed them. And he remembered, too, the hiss when a ladle of water was spilled by accidenta, sudden end to all that brightness. "Yes," he thought, "that is what you are." But still, he hesitated, because part of him feared that the oak's question was not so simple. Part of him wondered if there were another answer he could not yet see. In the hollow of the tree, the faint ember glow pulsed slowly once, twice, as though marking the last of his time. The voices around him began to stir again, a sibilant chorus, each word needling at the edges of his resolve. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Child's guessing. The lantern will fade. The way will be closed to you. He thought then of all the times he had been called foolish for daring to dream beyond the boundaries of the fields. He remembered the neighbors who had shaken their heads when he left for the fortress, whispering that he would return in shame within a fortnight. He thought of the mornings he had risen before dawn to train, long before any of the squires with noble blood had stirred. He thought of every ache and bruise and doubt, and he knew if nothing else that he would rather speak and fail than stand silent and be consumed by fear. He took a single step closer to the oak. The hollow yawned wider, and the cold that issued forth seemed almost to slow his breath. But still he lifted his chin and spoke. "Fire," he said, steady and clear. "The answer is fire." There was a pause, then so long he felt the shape of it in his chest, like a held breath. The lantern guttered, its flame drawing in on itself to a single trembling spark. Alder's heart pounded in the hush, and then the ribbons hanging from every branch lifted as if stirred by a wind he could not feel. The hollow began to close, and the ember glow faded to darkness. When next the voice came, it was softer, almost approving. "You have spoken truly," it murmured. "Fire is what I amend. Fire is what you carry within you. The trial of the question is ended." As those words fell into the hush, Alder felt warmth spread through his limbs. The lantern blazed up again, bright as it had been at the gate. He looked down and saw that the flame within no longer trembled. It burned steady and sure. Around him, The whispering voices fell silent, as though the forest itself had turned to listen. For a moment, all was still. Then the oak spoke again, and this time the voice seemed almost sad. "Child of Lowen Field, be warned. What you call courage can also be your undoing. What you call light can blind you to shadows that should be heeded. Walk with care." Alder bowed his head, unsure whether to feel chastened or heartened by those words. But when he looked up again, he saw that the path beyond the oak had changed. Where before there had been only tangled roots and impenetrable dark, there now stretched a narrow trail, soft with moss and lit by faint green motes that drifted in the air like slow, dreaming fireflies. He took one step toward it and then paused, for though the voices were gone, he felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, curious and watchful. And in that moment, he knew that this was only the smallest of the trials, waiting in the deep heart of the forest. He turned back once to look at the oak, though its hollow was sealed again. In the quiet, he felt the strange sense that something ancient had measured him and found him worthy if only for this first passage. He lifted the lantern high, feeling the warmth in his palm, and set his foot upon the new trail. The moss yielded under his step like a living thing. As he walked, the hush of the place deepened, until each breath felt as though it rang in the stillness. He could no longer hear even the sigh of the wind in the branches only, the slow beat of his heart, and the soft creak of his boots. And there we will pause, dear friends. Let the hush of that place drift around you like the hush of your own quiet room tonight. Feel how Alder's small, steady flame is not so different from the ember you carry in your own chest, the part of you that keeps stepping forward, no matter how many voices try to turn you back. Know that this first trial has been met and passed. Know that the night is long, but the way through it is made one step at a time. Rest in that knowing. Close your eyes, if they have not closed already. Breathe in the stillness of the deep wood, where all things wait to be discovered, and all courage is forged in darkness. And so, my dear friends, the boy called Alder passed through the first gate in darkness, with only the glow of a single lantern to show him the way. Perhaps you have known such moments yourself, when you have come to the end of all you understood, and found that you must walk on with nothing but faith in your own small light. If so, you know already that this is the truest test of all. Alder walked on, each footstep measured and slow. The moss under his boots was so soft it seemed almost to hush his passing. Around him, the trees grew closer, their limbs woven into vaults so high he could scarcely see the sky. Here and there, the faint green motes still drifted lantern bugs, the old folk called them, though none could ever catch one. They shone with a glow like distant stars, marking the hidden paths that no map had ever set down. The deeper he walked, the stranger the air became. It smelled of rain that had not yet fallen, of blossoms that opened only for the moon. It carried the memory of snow and old leaf mold, and something older, still a sweetness so soft, he felt his heart ache without knowing why. When the trail curved again, he found himself standing at the edge of a glade, and there beneath the silver wash of moonlight stood the moonlit stag. The second trial, the moonlit stag. It is a hard thing to describe the first sight of such a creature, for no words can hold all the wonder of it. The stag was tall as a warhorse, yet no heavier upon the earth than a thought. His hide shone like polished silver, each hair edged in pale light. His antlers rose in a branching crown, catching the moon itself among their tines. And when he turned his eyes upon Alder, the boy felt every doubt and fear melt away, leaving only a hush as deep as midnight snow. The stag did not speak aloud, but within Alder's mind, he heard a voice clear and quiet, like a bell struck once and left to fade. "You have come to the second trial." Alder swallowed, his mouth dry as old parchment. He tried to find words, but none would come. So he simply inclined his head, as one knight might to another. "You must follow me," the stag said. And though the voice was no louder, it filled all the dark spaces in Alder's heart. "Follow without question. Do not stray from my path. If you lose me, even for a single breath, the trial will end. You will not find your way again." Alder tightened his grip on the lantern. The flame within it pulsed once bright, then steady. "I understand," he whispered. The stag turned, slow as a drifting leaf, and began to walk. They crossed the glade in silence. The moss underfoot gave way to smooth stone, as pale as bleached bone. Where the stag set his hooves, a faint gleam lingered like the last trace of moonlight upon water. Alder followed, never more than 2 steps behind. The path wound among trunks so broad he could have lain down across their roots without reaching either side. High above, branches interlaced into arches finer than any mason could craft. Here and there, he glimpsed movementa moth with wings like thin parchment, a pale snake sliding into shadow. Time blurred. The steps became a rhythm, slow heartbeat in the hush. The stag never faltered, never turned. Only sometimes he would tilt his antlered head as if to be certain Alder still walked behind him. The lantern began to feel heavy. The boy's arms trembled, though he would not allow himself to lower it. He knew, though no voice told him, so that if he let the flame gutter, he would be lost. At last, after a time he could not measure, the stag halted. Before them yawned a wide black pool, its surface still as glass. No reeds grew at its edges, no ripple stirred its heart. But beneath the ice-dark water, shadows moved slow as dreams, shapeless and pale. The stag turned to Alder. In the hush, his voice returned, quiet and solemn. "This is the frozen pool. You must cross it alone. Take no heed of what stirs below. Listen to no voice but your own." Alder stared at the water. 100 questions rose in his throat. Thick was the ice. How deep did it go? What were those shapes drifting in its cold heart? But he asked none of them. Instead, he looked into the stag's luminous eyes and found no promise of safety, only the certainty that this was the path and no other. He nodded. "When you have crossed," the stag whispered, "I will be waiting." Then the great silver shape faded first to mist, then to nothing at all. Alder was alone again. He stood a long while at the shore, lantern raised. The surface of the pool mirrored the flame back to him only, trembling star in a sea of darkness. When he stepped onto the ice, the cold bit through boot and sole in a single breath. He felt it pierce up his legs into the marrow of his bones. The shadows below stirred, drifting nearer, drawn by the tremor of his steps. And then, very softly, he heard them call. Alder, his name, spoken as though by voices he had almost forgotten. "Alder, come down to us. He gritted his teeth and took another step. The ice creaked beneath him, long, slow cries that seemed to echo into the dark beyond the pool. Still he walked. Again, the voices called softer now, coaxing. "It is cold, so cold. Come to the deep and be warm." He closed his eyes, though each step felt more treacherous than the last. He thought of his mother's kitchen, the bright hearth, and the smell of bread. He thought of the yarn in his pocket and the promise she had made. "You are never alone." The lantern flared brighter for a moment. He set his foot forward. The shadows drifted close to the ice, their faces vague as smoke. He would not look down. Step by step, he crossed. Step by step, he held the flame before him. When at last his boot found earth again, he nearly sank to his knees in relief. The cold ebbed from his limbs in a long sigh. The voices faded into silence. The lantern glowed steady, as though it too had been tested and proven true. He looked up, and there, waiting in the hush, stood the moonlit stag once more. "You have crossed the frozen pool," the voice whispered in his mind. "Gentle now. The second trial is ended." Alder bowed his head. He could not find any words worth speaking. The stag turned, and this time he did not fade. Instead, he began to walk again deeper into the hush of the trees. Alder followed. "Here we shall pause, dear ones. The second trial is done." The boy walks deeper into the night-weald, and the path ahead holds more wonder sand, more tests than any dream can hold. As you rest tonight, remember that you, too, have crossed many frozen pools in your own way, moments when you heard voices that would have turned you aside. And yet, you set your foot forward. Let that knowing keep you company now. Close your eyes, if they are not closed already. Feel the hush of the deep forest settle over you, cool and soft and endless. The lantern still burns, and the night goes on. And so, dear hearts, Alder passed beyond the frozen pool. Behind him lay the whispers in the ice, and the long hush that had tested the marrow of his bones. Before him, the moonlit stag walked on. Its silver shape glided between the trunks, leaving no trace but the hush that followed in its wake. Alder felt the ache in his limbs, the heaviness in his chest, but he did not falter, for he had come too far to look back. And in his lantern still burned the same small, stubborn flame that had carried him this far. The forest around him changed as he walked. The trees grew closer still, their roots rising in twisted ridges, taller than any man. The moss deepened, muffling every footstep, until it seemed he drifted rather than walked. A hush, deeper than sleep, pressed against his ears. After a time he could not measure, the stag halted. Its antlers gleamed like a crown of frost. Slowly, it turned to face Alder, and the voice returned not in words spoken aloud, but in the quiet of his thoughts. "Here ends my guidance," it whispered. "The third trial is not for any creature of fur or feather. You must pass alone." Alder swallowed. Though he did not understand, he nodded. "Beyond this hollow," the stag continued, "waits the wraith's bargain. Listen carefully, and remember that no gift from shadows is ever free." Then, the moonlit stag inclined its head a gesture. So solemn Alder felt a pang in his chest and slowly faded to mist. He stood alone once more. He turned to look ahead. The trees parted around a broad hollow, its floor strewn with a drift of pale ash. Alder stepped forward, the hush closing around him like a held breath. The lantern's glow danced across the white ground, sending shadows scurrying along the ring of trunks. In the center of the hollow, a single black stone jutted from the ash smooth as glass, taller than a man. And as he drew near, the shadows began to gather at its base. They coiled together, curling, rising, taking shape until a figure stood before him. Its body was all darkness, like the afterimage left upon the eye when a bright flame dies. But its face was smooth and pale as polished bone. When it spoke, the voice was soft, almost tender, like a mother soothing a fevered child. So small, it murmured, so brave, and so alone. Alder said nothing. The figure tilted its head. Its blank face caught the lantern's glow, but reflected nothing back. "Why do you tremble, little flame-bearer? Do you think I mean you harm?" He swallowed, finding his voice. "I don't know what you mean," he said. "Then listen," the wraith whispered. "For I have watched you since your first step beyond the gate. I have seen your doubts, your weariness, the cold in your marrow, the ache in your bones. Its hand rose long-fingered, all darkness, and hovered near the lantern. "I can take it away," it breathed. "All of it." Alder felt the ache in his shoulders, deepened felt the hunger that had been gnawing at him since nightfall, the weight of all that had come before. For a single heartbeat, he almost lowered the lantern. "Give me your flame," the wraith said, "and I will give you peace. You will walk this forest unafraid. You will never hunger, never ache, never doubt again." He closed his eyes. The offer wrapped around his thoughts like warm cloth. He imagined laying the lantern down, letting the hush swallow him. No more trials, no more fear, only rest, only forgetting. "You have only to let go," the wraith whispered. "It is such a little thing to give." But then, far beneath that voice, he felt something stir in his memory. A different voice, soft and steady. "There will come a time when fear sits upon your shoulder, whispering all the reasons to run. Courage is not a shout, my son. It is a single step." He drew in a long, slow breath, and when he opened his eyes, he met the blank gaze without flinching. "No," he said. The wraith's hand froze. The hush deepened. "No?" it echoed, and for the first time there was something colder beneath the softness. "I will keep my flame," Alder whispered, "even if I must carry it alone." The wraith tilted its head. A hush deeper than silence filled the hollow, so complete that he heard his own heartbeat like a drum. "Then you must pay the price," the figure said, and its voice was no longer gentle. It lifted both hands, and the shadows at its feet rose in a slow wave curling around the black stone, the pale ash, Alder himself. The lantern flared, fighting back the dark. For an instant, he felt it, something cold and vast, pressing against his spirit, measuring him. And then, like smoke drawn into a hidden vent, the darkness fell away. The wraith had vanished. The hollow lay empty. But at the center of the black stone, a narrow crack had opened. Within it, something gleamed, a shard, no longer than a finger, bright as starlight, caught in crystal. Alder stepped forward. As he reached out, warmth flooded his palm. When his fingers closed around the shard, he felt the ache in his bones recede. But not all the way. A reminder, perhaps, that nothing is ever freely given. When he turned from the hollow, A new path stretched ahead, narrow and winding, flanked by walls of bramble taller than any tower. He held the lantern high, and its glow touched the thorns. Each was tipped in silver, each trembled as though alive. Alder walked on. The brambles closed behind him. The path twisted, turned, narrowed again. At last, it ended in a clearing where a ruin crouched beneath the tangled Bausa chapel of pale stone, its roof long gone, its walls split by roots thicker than a man's thigh. Thorns climbed every arch, every broken lintel, yet when the lantern's glow fell upon them, he saw they bore small white blossoms, blooming in the dark. He stepped through the ruined doorway. At the far end of the chapel, a figure waited hooded, robed in trailing black. He could not see its face, but when it raised its head, he felt the hush deepen until even his heartbeat seemed to pause. The figure lifted one slender hand, and in the hush, its voice came so soft it was almost a thought. "You have brought your flame into this place. Few have carried it so far." It beckoned him closer. "Within these walls, you must choose one thing to leave behind," it whispered. "A burden, or a memory, or a piece of your fear." Alder's throat tightened. "Choose with care," the keeper murmured, "for what you leave may never be reclaimed." He closed his eyes. He thought of the cold that had crept into him on the frozen pool. He thought of the ache in his shoulders. But most of all, he thought of the doubt small as a seed, yet heavy as any stone. At last he spoke. "I will leave my doubt." The keeper inclined its hooded head. "So be it." The thorns stirred parting, as though to drink his words. A hush like sleep washed over him so deep he nearly fell, and when he opened his eyes again, the doubt was gone, as though it had never been. The keeper lowered its hand. "The third trial is ended." A moment of rest. And so, dear hearts, the boy who began in fear and hunger walked on lighter by one burden, steadied by the same small flame. Let your own burdens ease for a time. Feel the hush of that chapel settle around you. Know that you too have walked many trials unseen and found your way onward. Close your eyes if they are not closed already. Breathe slow and feel the hush grow deeper still. The lantern still burns, and the night goes on. And so, my dear ones, Alder passed through the chapel of thorns lighter by the doubt he had carried so long, though the memory of it would always remain, like the faint outline of a scar. When he stepped beyond the ruined arch, he found that the forest had changed again. Where before there had been bramble and root, now there stretched a clearing so wide he could not see the far side. And in that vastness, the hush deepened until it felt as though he walked beneath a sky made not of stars, but of silence itself. The lantern's glow trembled across the moss. Every step he took left no trace behind, and though he knew each trial had been marked by signs and watchers, here he felt as though even the trees themselves had turned their faces away. At the heart of that emptiness, something waited. Tall as 3 men, narrow as a doorway, it stood an arch of polished black stone, framing a surface that shimmered like water beneath moonlight. As Alder drew near, he saw his own lantern reflected in that shifting gleam, bright and fragile. This was the mirror of years, the 4th trial. Perhaps you have heard tales of such mirrors, for every old country has its own version. A looking glass that shows not the face you wear today, but all the faces you have worn all those you might yet wear, a truth too large for any heart to hold without trembling. When Alder stood before it, the lantern's glow spread across the mirrored surface. He saw himself as he was, a boy grown taller than he had ever imagined, yet still carrying the same quiet ache in his chest. The ache that had driven him from the fields to this place beyond all maps. The hush grew heavier. He felt it pressing against his ribs, against the pulse in his throat. And then, slowly, the mirror began to change. At first, he thought it was only the play of the lantern's light. But then, he saw that the face before him was no longer quite his own. He watched, unable to look away. In the mirror, he saw himself as a child barefoot among the sheep, his hair tangled, his hands scratched by briars. He saw the boy who had stood in the road to watch the White Star Knights ride past, his heart hammering with a longing too large for words. Then the glass rippled, and he saw himself older, his hair streaked with silver, his shoulders stooped beneath some weight he could not yet name. The lantern he carried had become a staff, crowned by a small, steady flame. His face was lined, but his eyes were clear. Another ripple. He saw a man in armor, bright as the morning, kneeling in a field of broken banners. He saw a farmer, stooped over a furrow of turned earth, planting seeds by moonlight. He saw himself standing before a small cottage door, a child in his armchair hair, the same pale gold that had crowned his mother. And with each vision, something in his chest pulled tight. For each was true in its own way, a path that might yet open before him. At last, the hush deepened to a hush beyond sound. Within it, a voice spoke not from the glass, but from the darkness beyond all seeing. "These are the years that wait for you," the voice murmured. "Each a thread you may yet weave, each a life you may yet claim." Alder swallowed. "To pass this trial," the voice continued, "you must choose one vision to guide you, and in choosing, close the others away." He felt his heartbeat in his palms, in the soles of his feet, in the hollow of his throat. How could any soul choose? How could any heart set aside all it might become? Yet he knew deep, as the ache in his bones, that to stand still was also a choice. And so he closed his eyes and let his breath slow. When he opened them, he lifted the lantern higher and spoke. "I choose the man who stands with the child at the door." The hush shifted, as though some hidden current had changed. "Why this path?" the voice whispered. He did not look away from the mirror. "Because no matter what I do, no matter how far I walk or what victories I win," he said, "I want there to be something gentle waiting at the end." The surface of the mirror grew still. The other visions faded, one by one, until only the image he had chosen remained. A man grown older but unbowed, holding a sleeping child beneath a quiet sky. The hush softened. The voice spoke once more, gentler than before. "Then let this be your compass in the darkness." The mirror's gleaming surface dimmed, leaving only the lantern's glow. When Alder looked down, he felt something small and weightless settle in his palm, a single silver thread, finer than any hair, glinting with the last reflection of all he had seen. He wound it carefully around the base of the lantern's handle. Though its light did not brighten, it felt steadier in his grasp. The hush began to recede. A path opened beyond the mirror narrow, winding, lit by the same faint green motes that had marked his first steps. He turned away and walked on. The path wound deeper, Here the trees grew so close that their roots rose into walls on either side. The hush grew colder, heavier. He felt it settle into the hollows of his bones. When at last the trail widened, he found himself standing upon a threshold of carved stone. Beyond it stretched a bridge so narrow it seemed barely wider than his own shoulders, arching across a chasm blacker than any midnight. No railing, no ropes, no markers. Only the slender span and the hush that waited below. He set his foot upon the first stone. The bridge did not shift beneath his weight, but in the darkness beneath, shapes began to stir. Shadows rose, drifting upward pale hands, hollow faces, mouths opening in silent cries. He closed his eyes and kept walking. Step by step, the bridge carried him over the dark. Step by step, the shadows drifted closer. Some were small, no larger than children. Some were tall as giants, their arms long enough to brush the underside of the stones. Though their mouths moved, no sound came. But in his mind, a chorus of voices rose soft, pleading, desperate. Turn back. Stay with us. It is too far. You will never find the dawn. The lantern trembled in his hand. He thought of the face he had chosen in the mirror of Years the Man, with the child in his arms. He thought of the silver thread wound around the lantern. He thought of the warmth in his mother's voice when she said he was never alone. He kept walking. When he set his foot upon the last stone, the shadows fell away. The voices faded. The hush lifted. He stood once more upon solid earth. Ahead, the trees parted, revealing a narrow glade bathed in silver light. At its center rose a small stone shrine plane, unmarked save for a single lantern carved into its face. As he stepped toward it, he felt the last of the cold recede from his bones. A moment of rest. And so, dear hearts, Alder passed the crossing of shadows. The fourth trial ended, and the night deepened around him. Let your own breath ease now. Feel how the hush that tested him is the same hush that now cradles you. Close your eyes, if they have not closed already. Know that your own small flame still burns quiet, steadfast, unforgotten. And the night goes on. And so, dear friends, Alder stepped beyond the narrow glade and the stone shrine. The path before him curled like a silver ribbon, winding through trees, whose leaves whispered like a secret only the night could keep. Though the air was cool and soft, he felt a change, something ancient, almost sacred. He knew, deep in his bones, that he had come to a place where memories lived, not the kind you keep in your heart, but the ones forgotten, lost, or left behind by others long gone. The hush thickened as he entered what the old tales called the Garden of Forgotten Names. The Garden of Forgotten Names. The garden stretched wide beneath a sky, woven from twilight and dawn neither fully night nor day. Flowers bloomed here, whose petals shimmered with colors unseen in the waking world hues that seemed to hum softly as he passed. Some grew tall as trees, their blossoms shaped like stars. Others curled low to the ground, glowing faintly as if lit from within. But the strangest thing was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the weight of stories not told. The scent of memories fading, like letters unopened for centuries. Alder's steps were slow and soft. Every leaf, every petal seemed to watch. And as he moved deeper into the garden, he found himself drawn toward a narrow stone path, edged with lanterns each, one etched with a name. The Keeper of Names. At the end of the path stood a figure draped in robes spun from twilight shadows, face hidden beneath a hood. In one hand, the keeper held a lantern. Its light flickered with an eerie glow, half shadow, half flame. The keeper turned to Alder, and though the face remained unseen, the voice was warm and low, like the rustle of leaves. "Welcome, Flame-bearer. You have walked through the trials with courage. But here, you must face what is left behind." Alder's throat tightened. He had not realized how much he carried not just in his lantern, but within his soul. "You must choose a name to remember," the keeper said. "A story to carry forth, so it will never be lost." Alder looked down at the lanterns lining the path. Each bore a name, some familiar, others strange and foreign. He wondered whose stories had been forgotten, and why. His fingers brushed the cool stone of one lantern. The name etched there was simple: Era. A memory bloomed in his mind, an image of a girl with hair like moonlight, laughter like spring water, and eyes full of unspoken dreams. Era had been a child from a village long swallowed by the forest, a soul lost to time but not forgotten here. Alder's heart ached. He reached out and touched the lantern, feeling the warmth pulse beneath his palm. "Then carry her story," the keeper whispered, "so the garden may bloom anew." Alder nodded, feeling a quiet resolve settle over him. He gathered a handful of silver petals from the nearby blossom soft as Whispersand tucked them into his cloak. The keeper lifted the lantern high, its light shifting like dusk on water. "For your courage," the keeper said. "Take this, the dusk lantern. It will guide you through the darkest paths and call forth the strength hidden in your heart." Alder took the lantern, feeling its gentle glow mingle with the fire of his own. Though small, its light was steady, filled with the weight of remembered names and unspoken promises. The keeper stepped back, the shadows swirling like a cloak. "Go now," the voice said, "and carry both flame and memory forward." A moment of quiet strength. And so, dear friends, Alder stepped from the garden of forgotten Nameshis, steps lighter, his heart fuller. He carried not only his own flame, but the stories of those who had come before. And as you rest tonight, know that your own stories, forgotten or remembered, are carried in the hush around you. Close your eyes. Breathe in the gentle night air. Feel the steady pulse of your own light, shining quietly through the dark. The lantern still burns, and the night goes on. And so, dear friends, Alder stepped onward, his cloak heavy with silver petals, his hands steady with both lanterns' gentle glow. The forest around him grew stiller, as if holding its breath, waiting, watching. The path wound higher now, rising above the trees until the air grew thin and sharp with cold. Here, the stars seemed closer, brighter, like old friends, just beyond reach. Alder looked up, the twin lights of his lanterns casting soft pools of warmth against the creeping chill. He knew the next trial awaited, the trial of the whispering winds, and beyond it, the gate of stars. The winds began softly, like breath across a window pane. But as Alder climbed, they grew louder, whistling and sighing through the branches like a choir of unseen voices. They spoke in riddles and half-truths, their tones weaving between the leaves. "Turn back. The path is lost. The light will fail. The night is endless. Why do you carry such a burden? Each word was a thread, tugging at his mind, trying to unravel the steady flame within. Alder pressed on, tightening his grip on the lanterns. He remembered the lessons of the Wraith's bargain and the mirror of years. He whispered to himself, soft as a prayer, "I carry my flame and the stories of those who walked before me. I will not be undone." The winds swirled in sudden gusts, lifting leaves like dancers spinning in moonlight. Shadows flickered and lengthened, playing tricks on his eyes' faces, half seen, shapes just beyond the glow. Alder paused often, listening not to the winds, but to the steady beat of his own heart. He let the cold bite, the voices swirl, and still he walked, step by step, deeper into the hush. At last, the winds died to a whisper. The path opened onto a wide clearing, where the stars above seemed to reach down and touch the earth. Before him stood a great archway, carved from stone, that shimmered like starlight caught in ice. Runes glowed softly along its from ancient words of power, waiting to be spoken. Alder raised both lanterns. Their light mingled in the still air, casting patterns like woven threads across the stones. He knew what he must do. He stepped forward, placing his hands upon the arch. In his mind, the voice came again clear, steady, like a beacon in the dark. Speak the words of the path you choose. Speak the name you carry, and open the gate. Alder drew a breath deep and slow. He spoke, voice steady though his heart beat fierce. By flame and shadow, by memory and light, I walk the path through endless night. I carry the stories, the hopes, the names, and open now the gate of stars' flames. The runes flared bright then faded, leaving only the quiet glow of the stones. The archway shimmered and slowly parted, revealing a path of silver dust that stretched beyond the forest, into the vast unknown. Alder smiled, lantern steady in his hands. He stepped forward, beyond the gate, ready for whatever lay ahead. And so, dear friends, we come close now to the journey's end. Alder has walked through fire and ice, shadow and silence. He carries his flame, his memories, his courage, and the gentle light of stories shared. As you lie beneath your own stars tonight, know that your own path is lit by such flame small, steady and true. Close your eyes, breathe deep. Feel the hush of the night cradle you. The lanterns burn still, and the night goes on. And so, dear friends, Alder stepped beyond the gate of stars. The path beneath his feet was soft as starlight, stretching like a ribbon into the dawn. Though the night had tested him in ways he never imagined, his heart was steady, his flame still burning bright. Ahead, the first light of morning brushed the edges of the sky, a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The forest around him softened in the gentle glow of dawn. Birdsong returned, shy and sweet, as if waking from a long, deep sleep. Alder's steps slowed, his breath steady and warm. He carried the dusk lantern, the silver petals, and the silver thread wound tight around his own lantern's handle, tokens of the trials he had faced and passed. Each one a story, a memory, a piece of his own soul. As the sun rose, Alder found himself back where his journey had begun. The village fields, the river bend, the quiet road that led home. But now, everything was different. The light held new warmth. The air was sweet with promise. and within him a strength he never knew before. He knew the trials were not just tests of courage, but of heart reminders that even in the darkest night, a steady flame can guide the way. Before the village, Alder stopped. He knelt by the earth and placed his lantern down, its small fire burning steady. He whispered a quiet prayer, thanks for the journey, for the lessons, for the strength to carry on. And then he looked up. His eyes met the rising sun. No matter how long the night, he thought, there is always dawn. And so, dear ones, the night of 7 trials ends not with a shout, but with a quiet knowing. A knowing that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to carry your light, however small, through the darkest hours. As you rest beneath your own stars tonight, may you find your own steady flame. Close your eyes now. Breathe deep and slow. The lanterns burn still, and the night goes on. Thank you for walking this story with me, dear friends. If this tale has brought you comfort or courage, please consider subscribing so we may share many more nights like this together. Good night, and may your dreams be gentle.